All right, well, welcome everybody to the Automation Studio Bootcamp, the Deep Dive series. We've got a couple of more sessions coming up. Oh, sorry, let me go back one. Today we're going to be going over building a custom lead ranking system in Automation Studio. We've got a couple of sessions coming up for the Automation Studio Bootcamp, which is wrapping up soon. We've got, so please look out for those sessions. We've got Sandesh next week doing custom functionality. We've got Matt, who's on the call today, doing Foundation Automational Studio Solutions, and then wrapping up with Samal at the end, beginning of April. There's also a fantastic Marketing Cloud Encore Bootcamp that is ongoing. Those are continuing next week and the following week. Really cool sessions, updates on all of the cool Marketing Cloud growth and advanced technology and advancements that are coming live and changing literally week to week. Definitely check that out. So we're going to talk about the why, why we're talking about lead ranking, sort of give you a real world use case. We're going to be going over the data points and values of how you would typically look at a lead ranking system. We're going to go over at a high level, like the three-step process that you would build this in Automation Studio. And then we're going to go right in the Marketing Cloud and build a couple of those components live today. So let's talk about the lead ranking system. So in this example, Cervelo Bank executed an all-out marketing blitz, generated a ton of leads for sales. 6 months later, they're not seeing, leadership's not seeing those sales being converted. So they talk with sales. Sales is swamped with all these new leads. They're not really sure how to prioritize them. And then by the time they get to a lead that might have been, someone who's very interested, it might have been gone, it might have gone cold. So that's why it can be helpful if you've got thousands of leads to develop a ranking system so that sales knows which ones you should follow up with first. Every solution for a lead ranking system is different, but here's a couple of different, thoughts as far as how you could build out the solution. So first of all, identifying those data points that determine that rank. Building ways to capture those data points and have them related to each lead or contact, depending on how you're doing it. The functionality to sum up those scoring across all those data points. And then if you're using the Salesforce CRM environment, most likely you are, updating that, those lead records so that score is visible and something that could be used with sales to prioritize. So just, brainstorming different ways that you can go and determine the rank. And this is not an exhaustive list, but, something that you could think about doing some sort of a whiteboarding session. If you're developing your first, lead ranking system, you'd want to consider positive and negative indicators, what might, make someone more qualified, a higher rank, what might make them less qualified, and then look across all of the interaction points, all of those criteria across all those different channels that might help you indicate whether that lead is, that ranking. So examples, a couple that we'll go over today. So on the Salesforce activity, you might have, that lead is in an active campaign. So the example we're using today is somebody is in a campaign to get them to attend a webinar. Depending on that campaign member status, that could determine their intent or their rank. Things like if they've opted out of email communication, that could influence different things. And then you could be bringing in like a third-party ranking solution like a SalesWing. On the Marketing Cloud side, we're probably all familiar with those engagement stats. Typically you want to start with click, possibly open, but as we all know, open can be tricky as far as being exact, an exact indicator. So typically clicks where you start. A couple of different variations of clicks. We'll talk about that today. And again, unsubscribes, subscriber status can determine that. You could have landing pages, forms that they're filling out, and then other channels, definitely, website might not be, could be an Experience Cloud, could be integrated. You might have it in Salesforce environment. That data could be on a third-party website. So you might want to bring that into Automation Studio to use as a indicator. Could be, third-party form. Could be like an abandoned cart, an order, a referral, just a couple of different ideas of those indicators that could say, okay, this one's a higher rank versus a lower rank. And then once you've identified all those different criteria, you'll just want to, put together some sort of a ranking system, both a positive or negative. Again, this is just a ballpark of different ideas. So like we're going over today, or we're going to be looking at a campaign, and depending on their different statuses, right? So if you're added to the campaign, say it's a webinar registration campaign, you might have a status of registered where everybody who's dropped into that campaign has a status, and that might add a value +5 to their ranking. If they had an email that was emailable and it actually went through and the journey was updating that campaign member status, that could, cause that ranking to go up. And then depending on how they're engaging in that campaign, if they, say that they've signed up to attend, they're committing that they're attending, then that might increase the ranking as well. And then also we'll show today, like, looking at clicks. So any click could have a positive, say +5, but a particular click, like if they click on a call to action button that's taking them to the form, that might be a higher value. And then we won't go through this today, but you could have, equate page views to a cloud page or to a website, form fill, and then had a couple examples of negative rankings as well. So what we're going to be going through today is this sort of 3-step process where we're, like we sort of talked about in the solution, we're going to be, adding a value. Now that we've determined what those values are, we're going to be adding the value to that subscriber, creating individual records based on that subscriber key that has a plus or a minus value. So do that for multiple different criteria. And then our second step would be to sum all of those values, either positive or negative. And then the last step would be to update that field in the Salesforce CRM environment. So before I jump into Marketing Cloud, I just wanted to check to see if there's any questions. I don't see any there. So please ask any questions at any time, and let's go into Marketing Cloud. So we're going to be using Marketing Cloud and Sales Cloud for this example. And for this use case, we've got a couple of different leads that were created in the Salesforce environment. So let me just zoom in a little bit, probably a little bit out of. So just for this example, we've got 4 different leads, and to help us, we're pre-naming them, so they should hopefully translate to their ranking. We've got cold leads, we've got warm leads, we've got hot leads, and then we've also got someone who may not have an email address that qualifies, leads in the Salesforce environment. And for each one of these leads, we did create a value, this lead score, that ultimately we're going to want to populate with a value that sales could modify. So that'll sort of be the end result, is be able to populate that value with the functionality that we're going to build. Now we've, just to sort of save time, we've dropped them all into a campaign. And so they are all now campaign members, and you can see, we'll show you the journey. They're at different stages based on their engagement with the campaign itself. And again, we're sort of taking a couple of steps to get this fast forwarded so that we can just have some data points to equate with our ranking model. to make this all work. So there's our campaign. Those are the different statuses. That'll be the first ranking value that we're going to want to equate is different campaign members in the Marketing Cloud environment. And then if we go into Marketing Cloud, let me pull up the email just so you can see what this email looks like. Again, this is just to equate to a different type of a click. So this is an email that most of those leads received, and we want them to attend that seminar. So this call to action button is going to go to a form fill where they can just confirm their information and attend that seminar. So we're going to want to check to see in our clicks, if somebody clicked on this call to action button, then they might receive a higher value than if they say they clicked on something about our savings products. So this is the email that everyone's been sent. We did have for one of our leads did click on the attend seminar where others didn't click on it. So we should hopefully see that built out in the data as well. And then let me just show the journey that we use to send the emails. So again, this was just to get this data populated so that we can create the automation queries and make everything work as expected. So I think it was this lead ranking test email. So this email is, if they were dropped into that campaign with a certain status of registered, they would receive that email. And this is where that update campaign member activity is changing them from registered to email sent. And you can see a couple of those leads, the email wasn't valid, so it was kicked out. So that's how we should see. We saw the campaign members data points showing some difference there, which hopefully we should see pulled out in the data when we're doing our ranking. Okay, so that sort of sets the stage. And so what we're going to want to build today are, we're going to go through 2 steps of that process. So over here, we're going to create 2 different values that we're going to build in our automation so that we can sum it up, instead of just having one. So we're going to build out our first subscriber key value is going to be their campaign member status. As you saw, it was we saw certain leads had a different status based on their engagement. So that's the first one we're going to build. And then the second one will be how they engaged with that email, whether they clicked or not, and then if they clicked a specific click. So we're going to build both of those queries live, just so that you can see the process of, now that we've identified the data points, now the step is how do we get those data points pulled in and associated with each of those subscribers so that we can sum up their values and create the ranking. So let's go into Query Studio, and we're going to build out the logic for our first use case, which is to determine a value based on their campaign member status. So we're going to do, when we're building any query, we're going to build our 3 sections, the select from and where. Now the data points where we're getting these campaign members are those synchronized data extensions. So I'm just going to duplicate this tab. We're going to go into Contact Builder, and we're going to go to the campaign member synchronized data extension, just so that we understand the syntax for that data extension and all the fields that are there. So we're going to click here under campaign member, and we're just going to copy this naming convention. We're going to drop this back into our query. So that's all we should need for this query as far as where we're getting this data, right? Those campaign members. Now we're going to go, just for this specific use case, we're going to be very specific in that we only want a particular campaign that would indicate whether they got additional values. Now this is a very narrow use case. You would probably have this spanning a bunch of different campaigns, but just to make it simpler for this use case, we're going to want to pick that specific campaign that they're in Salesforce. So we're going to go to that campaign, we're going to copy that campaign ID. And then we're going to bring that in back into our query. And then we're going to drop that in there. So then all we need to figure out in the campaign member synchronized date extension is the field that has that campaign ID. So I typically, you typically will want to verify that before you copy. It looks like that's the right field, but you can go in and you can just double check campaign ID. It begins with a 7 number. That's usually the number. That is the number syntax for a campaign. So that looks right. So we're going to go in here and we're going to say campaign ID equals this campaign. So if you wanted to have this be for multiple campaigns, you could just do an in statement, and you could have that be comma separated for multiple campaigns. Okay, so fantastic. So now we've got, we're pulling in all of those campaign members for this campaign, and now we want to identify that subscriber key. What is that value on this campaign member that is going to determine its subscriber key? Now, because our solution is going to work for both leads or contacts, we're going to use this lead or contact ID. Again, depending on your use case, you could use the lead ID, you could use the contact ID. But for our example, we're going to use that. So lead or contact ID, and we're going to just name this as subscriber key, just because we like that syntax and we're talking about that in the Marketing Cloud environment. And then let's take the next thing that's going to determine our ranking is the campaign member status. And I think if we go back to our document, we were going to do, so registered was going to be a +5, email sent was a +10, attending was a +15. So to do this, we're probably going to want to use a case statement that's dependent on each of those different statuses. So my go-to on case statements is always Matthews. He has such fantastic documentation on the case statement. So if you go to his site, and I'll just drop this in the chat. And then you can, sort down by case. And I think there's a good example here that we can use. Let's see. Okay, let's use this one. This one is pretty good. I'm going to copy, thank you, Matthews, his syntax. That's how you start off with case. Sorry, I think I missed one more field. And as is important when a case. And we'll just paste that in there. That's the value of the field we're outputting. Okay. So when now we want to use the status field here. So let's just make sure that we've got the right field. Again, the status is for that campaign member status. So let's come back into the query. And we're going to say when that status equals registered, then we're going to have that be a value of 5. And then let's just copy this for the next 3. Yeah, we won't need an else on this one. Okay, so when status is email sent, then that's going to be a value of 10. And then when it is attending, then it's going to be 15. And let's just call this campaign 4. And then let me just make sure I've got these statuses right. So registered, email sent, and attending. So let's go back into Sales Cloud. Attending, email sent, registered. That all looks right syntax-wise because that is the data. That should be the data that we'll see in the sales in the synchronized data extension. Okay, so that should output the campaign score. I just want to double check our logic. I want to output the status as well so that we can see that. All right, so fingers crossed. I think I've got everything in here. I could be wrong though. Let's just try running this and see if we've got any errors. Okay, fantastic. Any questions? Okay, sounds like, okay, so Josh still working through audio. Any questions so far on setting up this use case as far as using campaign member statuses or the lead ranking starting that? Okay, no questions. Okay, here we go. So we're seeing we've got those 4 different leads that are all in that campaign. And we're seeing, now that we're seeing exactly pretty much what we saw on the campaign member screen as well in Salesforce. So we've got the 2 emails sent, we've got the registered, we've got the attending. And now based on that subscriber, we've got those scores populated. So this query looks like it is done and in a good place. So let's just, what I always do when I'm using Query Studio is I always save these queries in a notepad just so that I don't lose them because we're going to go and build out another query before we actually put this in a query itself. So there's the first step, populating those values for variable number 1. Let's just duplicate this query and we're going to tackle our next step, which is clicks. We want to pull down those clicks and we want to determine, so any click or any one of those subscribers, we're going to equate that to a +5. But if they clicked on that call to action button, then we're going to do it as a +10. So let's go into Query Studio. I'm going to steal this query a little bit because it's got some information that might be helpful. At least the campaign member. And the case statement might be helpful as well. Okay, so, all right, so for this query, our primary data source is the click data view. So let me just do a quick search in Google. So if you select Marketing Cloud data views, Matthews has a fantastic example as well. I'll give you another alternative resource. This is the official Salesforce documentation for those data views. And for those who are not familiar, data views are basically these inherent data extensions that you have, that engagement data extensions that are available. They're sort of behind the scenes, have them for all different types: click, bounce, send, unsubscribe, etc. But we're going to be looking for that click data view. This is where you find the use it for your from statement, that _click. And then these are all the different values that are available in that data extension. So first thing that we're going to want to do is to finish our join statement. So because we want to, again, narrow this down to those that are in that specific campaign, we're going to want to join those subscribers that are in that campaign. So that's why I wanted to keep this campaign member Salesforce data extension. So to join these two, first we're going to name this as C because that is that data extension. And then we're going to do a join, which is essentially an inner join, because we only want to pull in records that exist in both of these data extensions. And then we're going to name this as CM. And then we need to find a way to link these two data extensions, the click data view and the campaign member. So in that data view data extension, there is a subscriber key, which is fantastic. And that should align with the lead or contact ID on the campaign, which we already have up there in our statement. So we're going to say that C in that click, that subscriber key equals the CM.lead or contact ID. So that should help narrow our data set a little bit, just so that we're pulling in, again, just these leads that are in this campaign and their engagement, because there could be quite a lot of click activity that we don't necessarily need. We're going to want to add this to be a CM, so it's just pulling in the campaign there, our where clause. We also want to add in on the click data view, it can be helpful to use this is unique variable. So, you know, Marketing Cloud does capture all of the clicks. So it can be helpful, especially if you're just looking to determine the, you know, primary click, their first click in this example. So we're just trying to, again, narrow the data set as well. So we're going to use is unique there. And then that should clean up our where clause. And then now we need to do some modification of our select statement. So let's use this, since the click data view is our primary data store. Let's use that as our subscriber key. And let's also keep that status in there. And then to use our case statement, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out for right now. We'll come back to that in a second. What we now want to do is see if we can identify, see all the clicks that came through, and see if we can identify that click, that call to action click versus the just the general information click, because those are going to receive different different values. So in the data view, we should be able to pull in the link name, because what we did in this email build, we used an alias to determine, to describe the each of those call to action, or each of those links in our email. So the call to action link button should have a particular alias, but we're not sure what that is. We just want to output that. So let's just click run here. And so that link name is actually C, not CM. Let's see what we get here for data. Okay, and sorry, I didn't complete this. E equals true. Sorry about that. That is a Boolean field. We only want the is unique field to be true. You know, if it's all clicks available, it would be the ones that were false as well. Helps narrow our data set. So once we determine that link name, in fact, let's add back in that case statement, because while we're waiting for this to populate, we should have all of our information to fill out this case statement. So we can start working on that right now. So we're going to add in our case. We're going to make sure we get that comment in there. And this is going to be a click score. And we want, this is going to be just 2 values. In fact, we could probably just make this a else. We could just, let me just see what Matthews does for else. Yeah, it's just else and the value. So what we want to do is say that if their link name is equal to the value of that alias that says this is the call to action button, then we're going to add 10 points to that rank. Otherwise, we're just going to add 5 points, because we know they clicked. They just may not have clicked on that, that button. So here it is. Here's that sign up button. That's the one that is the call to action button. So we're going to take that link name and we're going to paste that in here. And then that should, now that we've added that in there, so this attending should have a value of 10. The other 2 should only have a value of 5. So let's just run that, see if that works as expected. And then that should wrap up showing you a way of using clicks in your different engagement data view data to equate to the subscriber a certain value that based on that lead ranking. Any questions so far on what we're building here as far as showing you another way, another data source to determine a value that might be used for your lead ranking? Okay.
I don't see any questions, Tim, as of now, but everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
Thank you, JB. And just while we're waiting for Query Studio, if you don't have Query Studio, it's a free application. If you search for Query Studio in Google, it'll pull up. Definitely fantastic, super fun. As you can see, you can take a look at all your data before actually creating queries and data extensions. All right, so here we go. Like that sign up button, as expected, it's got a higher click score, meaning that this person who clicked on that button, because their campaign member is changed to attending, they most likely went to that form, and then that form, once it was filled out, updated the campaign member in the Salesforce CRM environment. So there you go. There's another example of equating different ranks to subscribers based on their engagement. Okay, so now with those two completed, we'll go over to the automation itself. This is sort of to save time. I took both of those queries and brought them in over to this automation, and just to get that data populated in the data extension before we do our last step, which is going to be building a query, well, our second step, which is to build a query that's going to total those values based on that subscriber key. But in order to get that data set, we need to run our queries to populate them. So this query number one is the lead score by campaign, which we built. I might just need to refresh this. Sometimes Automation Studio pauses. And okay, so let's see if we can look at this real quick. So here's what we just built in Query Studio based on that campaign member, doing the 5, 10, or 15, depending on their campaign status. This is populating to this lead score total data extension. We'll go over that in a second. And then here's the second query, which we just created, which is doing that sign up button and populating that value based on their clicking. If they clicked anywhere, it's going to give them a value of 5. If they clicked on that sign up button, it's going to give them 10. Again, it's populating that same lead score total data extension. And the key point here, as you're building out your automation, is that each step, each different variable that you're adding, you're going to want to add that as an append in your automation so that it just keeps adding rows for each subscriber. So every time they get either a plus or a minus value, a new row is created so that you can sum up that at the end of the automation. Again, this is a way to do it. You can do it in different ways in Automation Studio, but that's the difference there. I just wanted to call that out. And then if we go back to this automation, what you might have is it might start out with your first variable overriding the lead score value, since you might be refreshing this on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Your first value could start off, so it starts off at 0 as you're going through each step. Okay, so let's just, now that we've got these two set up, we're going to run this once and see if we can get this data populated based on those queries that we populated. So we're just going to select run once. We're going to select just those two queries, and we're going to click run. And that should hopefully populate the data extension that we can now build the query to sum up these values, total them up. So that's something that we can have a variable that we can use to update the third step, which is update the lead score value in Salesforce. So if we go to the activity tab, we can just refresh this and see it's running. While we're waiting for that, let's go into the data extension and take a look at what this data extension, the fields are in this data extension. So I think it's this lead score total data extension. Let me just make sure I've got the right data extension. Let's see. Okay, so that's working, that populated. And okay, yeah, lead score total. It was actually in the process of populating. So let's take a look at this data. So we've got, we've got each subscriber in here, and it's populated based on their value or as they've gone through the query. So if we see this S6VS MAC, it's got a campaign value of 10, and then it's got a click of 5, right? So these records, it's not, this data extension does not have a primary key. You just want to keep adding rows and rows and rows of each of these subscribers as they're adding values, either plus or minus. So you can see not all of the campaign members clicked. So that's why only this campaign member, the VY MAC, is not on this list, because actually I didn't actually get sent the email. The other 3 subscribers did. So we've got our data set as far as all the different records for each subscriber of those values that would equate to a lead score. Now the challenge is how do we sum up all of these records and provide a sum total that would equate to that final lead rank. So to do that, we're going to build our third query. And this one should be relatively simple to do. First thing we're going to do is we're going to copy that data extension name. This is where we're going to get our data from. So if we go into Query Studio, we're going to do select where. And this is going to be from our lead score total data extension. We want to pull in that subscriber key, right? That is what we want to do, is sum up all of these values by the subscriber key. We actually won't need a where clause here. What we want to do is we want to do a group by. And we want to group by the subscriber key. And then what we want to do is a sum. And we want to sum up this field, which is value. So let's copy value. Put that in parens. And let's just call this total. So hopefully that's going to take all of those rows in that data extension. It's going to group them all by that subscriber key or that lead ID, and it should sum up that value to give you a grand total for that lead rank. So we should hopefully only see 4 records here. We shouldn't see 7, and we should hopefully see those totals be, added up with a final total, right? So there we go. So this is that. Looks like that's the attending lead that's got a score of 25. We saw 2 others that engaged with that email. They didn't go to attending. They're still in that email sent, so they've got a 15 rank, still good. And then here's that one subscriber that's just got 5 points. So there's that query of how to use to sum up all those values if you keep appending them and adding them as you're going through your automation. So let's go back to this automation and let's just verify that's the query that we built. I might have added a couple little nuances here, but it might just be literally that simple, right? And we just changed the values so it aligns to the data extension that we're populating here, but basically relatively straightforward query again for this exercise. Your lead ranking system might be a little bit more complicated, but just to visualize this. There's that. And then let me just hit save. And then the last part is that we're doing a journey, which is going to update that lead score value in the Salesforce environment. So let's just go to that journey real quick. And we can just take a look at that journey. It's a relatively straightforward journey. All we're using is the object activity to update that that record in the Salesforce environment. So let's just click in and show you the configuration here. Typically like to use the object activity because it works for all objects. Taking a second here to refresh. So you just go in and you select, in this example, we want the lead that needs to be updated. This is a simple update. We're just updating one field. There are quite a few fields in our lead object, but we want that lead score. And here, let's just click into that. Now that lead score is based on that score value that we're using on that third field, and it's in our data extension, and it's just populating that value. So that's all this functionality is doing. That's really all this journey is doing, is the end of our automation. It's going through and taking that total value and updating that lead score field on the Salesforce environment. So let's just hit save. And now we're going to just run this whole thing from end to end. And hopefully we should be able to see that lead score that we saw in this query. These values appear in the in each of these leads. So if we go to this attending lead, right now we don't see any lead score. We should hopefully see that populated to 25 once this runs. Let's go back into our activity. It's doing its thing. Okay, any questions while we're waiting for this to run? Not, I will watch the paint dry. Let's go to the data extension. I just want to show you that lead score data extension. That should be getting populated. Lead score update journey. This is a relatively straightforward data extension. It's just got the subscriber key. And again, this is that score value that we're using to, it's a number value that we're looking to populate on that lead score field in the Salesforce environment. So here we go. It's doing its thing. It's doing that first query. And let's go into this data extension and see what we've got here. There's that lead score total. It's doing its populating. It's still at 4 records, but probably will be populated in a second to 7. Okay, let's go back to the automation. That got populated. Now it should be populating that total. Let's go back into that data extension and see. Okay, there's that total. It's being popped. Now we've got all 7 of those records in there. Let's go to that journey update. That's still at 0. So the automation's still working, doing its thing. So yeah, just the typical automation would have, for each one of these different values, so this, you'd have a query. Ideally, you can try to consolidate these queries if you can, but this could be built out to 10 plus or different queries, and you can't really stack these. I mean, you can experiment with it. You tend to want to have them to be defined steps along the way because you're appending those records. I mean, I guess you could, stack them because they are individual, but again, something to experiment with. Let's go back to our, okay, there we go. That was popular. Let's go to this data extension. We should hopefully see those values. There's that lead score update journey values, which should be those 4 variables. We saw that in the Query Studio. Again, it's going to go into the journey. Each one of these leads are now going to be updated with these values on that lead score field. Let's go to our journey. Let's go to the running page. And we should see, yeah, we had initially had 4 journey subscribers in this journey. Now we are at 8. We're running this again. So those should get populated. Let's go back into the Salesforce environment. Let's check with this one rank and see if that got populated. It might have processed already or might be in the works to do that. Yep, there it is. There's that lead score. Again, this is for that hot lead. This is the one who was dropped into that campaign. They went through and received that email. They clicked on the call to action button that would take them to the form. They filled it out. Their campaign member got changed to attending. This is probably for the salesperson, their hottest lead. If we go over to the warm lead for Jane, we should hopefully see in their lead score, yeah, there's that 15 score. And then if we go to the cold lead, the one that did not respond, no send, let's take a look at their lead score. Yeah, and it's the lowest. So that's a way to show the salesperson, if they were starting their day, if it was a relatively simple use case, they'd want to focus on the lead that had the highest lead. And again, you could run a report or a list view based on the lead score by each of those leads, and then that would help prioritize who to go after first. So hopefully that gave you sort of a walkthrough of a very basic execution of how to build a lead score in Automation Studio. Hopefully it gave you a couple of different options of different criteria. So using the campaign, pulling that data from Salesforce CRM, using the click data view, using the engagement from those data views, using a different query to sum up all of those different variables to create that one total, and then connecting that to a journey so that you can use that value to update the Salesforce environment and see that that lead score being populated. Any questions on any of that lead score logic build out? Okay, awesome. Anybody on the call who's currently built a lead ranking system in Marketing Cloud Core? I know they're sort of out of the box in account engagement. Anybody have use cases for this type of a system that they've used in the past? No? Okay. All right. Well, I think JB will pass it back to you. That wraps up our session. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, this is like a workaround in the Marketing Cloud. I know in the Marketing Cloud account engagement, the leading and the grading, the scoring and grading are out of the box features. But in Marketing Cloud, this is something that we need to do as a workaround. Thanks, Tim, for going in depth on this topic. And we do have 3 more sessions in this series. So please register to all those sessions and make sure you follow these. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.